everyone, and welcome to another Facebook Live. We have here today Galen Wood. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. So here's a little bit about Galen Wood. He's been in the personal fitness industry for 18 years now.
True, a little bit more, yep.
And he's owned an in-house personal training program for about 13 years.
About 13 years,
yeah.
Yep.
And now he's developing a national personal training program. He's worked with celebrities, he's worked with moms, he's worked with people who just want to age gracefully. So he's had thousands of clients, I'm sure, over the course of 18 years.
Yep.
So he knows a little bit about workout programs.
At least 3 things.
Yeah.
At least 3 things.
Yeah. So he's going to tell us what to look for and what you should be looking for when choosing workout program, because there's so many out there.
Yep.
And there's so many fads, and it's so easy to get kind of swept up into things and not stick with it. So.
Well, and the thing is that there really is so much information out there, and there's new things that come out every month. Like every single month, there's a magazine that talks about, here's the new way to exercise, here's the new thing to do, here's what matters now, and we've discovered this thing. And the reality is that things don't necessarily change that much. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about what to look for when you want to start an exercise program.
Right.
And the idea there is more about kind of the philosophy that you have and the way you want to think about exercise, more so than okay, here's 10 tips to get your booty ready for summer, right? So the most important thing with any exercise program, no matter what you do, is to think long term. Right, so the idea there is that it's not that hard to lose weight for 30 days. You can do pretty much any of the fad diets, anything extreme, and you will lose weight for 30 days. When you start looking at the next 10 years or 5 years or even a year, that's when it starts getting harder to have an exercise program that's really effective. And that ideally is the thing that I like to talk to people about is think about the effectiveness and the sustainability of your exercise program. Right, so don't just think about it for 90 days. Think about it for a year, 5 years, 10 years. And so when you're looking at the choices you're making, make sure that you're thinking about it from the standpoint of, can I continue to make these choices for the next 10 years?
I'm assuming you're not a fan of those 30-day shreds.
Well, so and the reality is, I'm a fan of anything that works for people, right? And so a 30-day shred is great as long as you have a plan in place to maintain the results you get from that. Right, so if you have an understanding of what it actually is, okay, yeah, you want to do a 30-day shred, perfect. That's going to be a short-term fix that helps you to lean out, to lean down, right? And as long as you have a plan in place afterwards to maintain whatever changes you've made, great plan, right? And as long as you don't hurt yourself or do any kind of irrevocable damage, great plan, right? The thing that I look at though, and the way that I like to think about things is. Funny random thing. There was some I think it was Letterman or somebody who talked about how Stephen Colbert adjusts his glasses, and it was really cool. And every time I adjust my glasses now, I think of this. Oh, you're so cool now. Anyway, so we digress. The reality of starting an exercise program is when you go into it, think about it from the standpoint of sustainability. Right. So if you're doing something temporary, know that it's temporary, and know that it's not long term. It's a short term thing that you're going to have to figure out how to sustain the results you get from that, right? And the reality is that even if you do something short term, you drop 10 pounds, you gain 5 back, you're still down 5 pounds. Just make sure that you don't drop 10, gain 20, which is what happens a lot of times with the more quick fix kind of things.
That's
right?
True.
So from my standpoint though, I like to look at it as, because we're thinking long term, you don't have to do any really big changes, right? There's no extreme, okay, let's get you beach ready in 2 weeks, let's get you Bahama ready in 14 days, that kind of stuff, which was literally the same thing. But, more I like to look at it as all right, let's figure out how to change your life kind of one day at a time, and then help you to maintain it for the next 10 years or 20 years or 30 years or something like that. And so the biggest thing for me is when you're thinking about that, you look at safety first. You look at being a little bit more conservative. You look at slow, progressive changes, which is not nearly as glamorous, right? Hey, let's help you change your body for the next 10 years. It'll take you 5 years.
It's sustainable change.
But it's sustainable change, right? But it's definitely not as flashy. But I think it's more realistic, right? It's definitely something that's it's easier. It's just more realistic, right?
It's easier to swallow too. If I went straight from eating junk food to eating only juice.
Yeah, celery. Welcome to the celery diet.
Yeah.
No more Big Macs, just celery for the next 30 days. You will totally lose weight. And here's my Facebook tip to you. If you only eat celery for 30 days, you will lose weight.
We don't endorse that.
Do not try this at home or anywhere. But that's the reality. No, so the idea there is if you're looking at long-term change, you can be more conservative, you can be safer, you can take it easier, right? Like it's easier to kind of make slow changes because you're not overstressing your body. One little kind of piece of science around all this stuff is that your body can only handle so much change. It can only handle so much stress. We as Americans tend to be really stressed. And so, implementing a new change, even if it's for an exercise program or something that's good for you, still registers as a new stress. And if you overdo your stress, you tend to have kind of like a backlash and that's why, a lot of times like people go on the celery diet, which is, not a real thing, but people go on the celery diet and then and they lose 20 pounds and then gain 40 back, right? Because there's this kind of backlash both choices. Anyway, we digress again. So the reality of starting a fitness program, being safe, being conservative, everything is about progress, right? So if you're not doing anything, you're in an amazingly enviable position where literally anything that you do is better than what you've been doing, right?
From ground zero.
Right. So so often people start exercise programs and they're like, well, I haven't been doing anything, and they feel bad about it. It's like, you know what? I mean, yes, maybe you should feel a little bit bad about it because ideally we should all exercise. I should exercise more, da-da-da-da-da. But the reality is if you're not doing anything and you do 1 minute every day, your body will change. And then you do 2 minutes, body will change. 3 minutes, body will change, right? And so you don't necessarily need to go into it as like if you're at ground zero and you jump in and you start doing an hour every day, not only are you not going to necessarily get the full benefit of that change because your body can't adapt that quickly, you're wasting a ton of your time. Enjoy the fact that you don't have to do as much as everybody else who might be exercising more than you, right? Enjoy the fact that you literally just have to do more than you've been doing. And that's true for anybody, right? Whether you exercise every day, whether you work out twice a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, 5 times a week, 0 times a week, everything is about progress. And so everything is about just doing a little bit more than you've been doing. So starting an exercise program, do more than you've been doing. Right, and think about it from the standpoint of like sustainable change. See, I just did the thing sophisticated. Ha ha. So sustainable change, right? So think about it with your schedule, and think about, okay, I can do 15 minutes a day, or I can do 20 minutes a day, or I can do 30 minutes a day, right? So you start with that kind of the time frame first, and then generally what I like to talk to people about, and what I do for myself, is that exercise is never going to be my number one priority. It's just never going to be, right? I have kids, I have work, I have company, I have all these kind of things that are going to take the place of, me having exercise be my number one priority. Now, the reality is if my kids come to me and they're like, Dad, if you do cardio every day for 2 hours, we will be far better grown-ups and we will be better human beings overall. I would do cardio for 2 hours every day, right? If somebody came to me and they were like, we'll pay you $7 million a year to do cardio for 2 hours a day, I would do cardio, right? We could do it together. We could split it, $3.5 million each. Do an hour each, it'd be great. Nobody's done that yet, right? So for me, I make sure that my fitness routine is the bare minimum that I need to do to get the results that I want, right? Partially because that leaves me a lot of room if I do want to improve my fitness, that I have some room to do more things, right? Because no matter where you are, no matter how fit you are, you have to do more if you want to progress, right? And at the same time, it also fits it into my life easier because it's not a huge it's not going to be my number one priority, right? It's important, but it's not a number one priority. And so I don't give it the amount of time to be a number one priority, right? I try and do it at the bare minimum. So when you're starting, look at that availability, look at that schedule, and then come up with your minimums, right? So for me, my minimum is 3 times a week for 15 minutes. That means that
that's pretty doable.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, especially for me, because I'm like literally I live around gym equipment. But that's realistic for me, right? There are definitely weeks when I would drive to Chicago, go to the gym, work out for 15 minutes, take a shower, and go to a meeting, right? And am I making huge progress? Am I beach ready? No. But can I keep up with my kids? Do I have less pain? Can I go upstairs without getting out of breath? Do I feel pretty good in my own skin? Yeah, which is good enough for me, right? And then my ideal is, yoga twice a week, some kind of, martial art or movement, weights 3 times a week, cardio twice a week, and Pilates, right? The amount of times I've hit my ideal, 0 times, but that's still my range, right? And so I get to, as long as I'm kind of within those parameters, I get to be satisfied with my exercise program. And what usually happens is I fall kind of somewhere in between there, right?
It's kind of like tampering your expectations and then.
Exactly.
Right.
And some of that is I'm a hypersensitive, emotional kind of guy, right? So if I'm like, I got to exercise this many times and I don't hit it, then I feel all bad about myself, and that's not fun, right? Whereas if I have my minimum, which is like 15 minutes 3 times a week, then, you know, on a busy week, I get to do that, and it's much easier and much better, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is that whereas I'm not making necessarily progress on those weeks when I'm hitting my minimum, I'm maintaining, right? Or at the very least, I'm not degrading as quickly, right? And that's a big deal, because for somebody like me, I tend to be, you know, someone who yo-yos, right? So I'll do really well for a couple weeks, and then I'll back off for a couple weeks and move backwards, right? And so if I just keep that habit alive by having a minimum in place, it makes it much more likely that I'm going to do it long term and it's going to be sustainable, which is the point of the whole thing.
Sustainable. That's the key
sustainable.
word.
And the idea that you want to do it with the hands too. Sustainable. Okay. All right. So the next piece of that, so you set your minimums, right? You have a realistic availability schedule. So you have an understanding of like, this is realistic for me, right? Don't worry about necessarily doing an hour a day or what the long-term, like your long-term goal is. Your goal is to be long-term, not necessarily to start by hitting your long-term goal, right? And so start with what's realistic. As long as it's more than you've been doing, you're going to make progress. And then just focus on the habit first. Keep focusing on the habit. Keep focusing on, this is sign language for exercise. Keep focusing on the habit. Keep focusing on the habit. It's not true. Very similar to the celery diet. These are true facts I made up right now. So you keep focusing on the habit. Keep focusing on the habit, and move from there, right? Because if you have the habit in place, everything else becomes easier, right? Because you can always pick up a magazine, you can always do an internet search, you can always stop into a Johnson Fitness and Wellness store, you know, and there will always be a number of different ways to progress or to change or to do something new, right? But if you don't have that habit built in the first place, nothing else matters, right? Because any change that you make that you can't sustain is going to be temporary. So focus on the habit, focus on being realistic with your time, set some minimums, have some ideals, and just make a little bit of progress from where you're at. And give yourself permission to slack off a little bit and not necessarily be at your end goal from the beginning. Just do a little bit more than you're doing and be realistic.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I think those were great tips if you're looking for a workout program.
I mean, yeah. If I do say so myself.
It's so important when you're starting a workout program to kind of be kind to yourself and not always have like the end goal in sight, like right here. You want to make little changes, be sustainable, think long term, and be motivated. We're here for you. Thanks for joining us again for Facebook Live, and we'll see you next week. Bye.